Thank you so much for having me. This has been an experience that I think Huell's paying me back because when we first started, can you hear me? Uh, Volume?
Yeah.
Anyway, when we first started the show, Huell Secretary, there you go. Okay, everybody hear that? Okay, we're good. You're okay on the mic? Okay. Anyway, the secretary called me and said, Louie, I don't know how to tell you this, but Huell wants you to come and pick up the car to take it into him at service. And I said, what? I said, give me Huell's phone number. So I called Huell. I said, Huell, what's this? You want me to take the car in to take it in and have it serviced? And we hadn't even started shooting yet. So he says, yeah, well, it's our car. We'll be driving all over California, and and so I said, Huell, I'm the cameraman, the sound guy, the lighting guy, and that's all I do. And so he gets real quiet and he says, okay, I'll take it in. And never heard about that again. I'm from San Bernardino. I was born in San Bernardino. My parents are from Mexico. And so my dad was I'm very proud of my parents. They're not here anymore, but they work very hard, and my dad worked for the shops in San Bernardino Railroad. And at age 11, my biggest dream, I wanted to be a Boy Scout so bad. And my dad decided to lease a store from my aunt and uncle in South Colton, which was pretty much a segregated community. And so I found a Boy Scout troop down there, all Hispanic kids, and it was the rowdiest Boy Scout troop you ever saw. If they would have given us merit badges for fighting, we would have all had merit badges. But it was a lot of fun. It was a great experience, and I worked in my dad's market. I was a little butcher at 11 years old, and I guess I did okay. I still have all my fingers, and graduated from Colton High School and went into the Navy because I had gone into Sea Scouts, and I was always in scouting. Went into the Navy, and I became a radarman, and then I was assigned to a ship, and my home port was Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. So I said, somebody had to protect the hula girls, right? So, but it was quite an experience, a learning experience. And then, of course, when I came out, I realized I had to go to college, and I went to a junior college, used my GI Bill and all that, and I was going into engineering, and one day I ran into a friend of mine from high school, and she happened to work at the TV station. We talked, and she offered to give me a tour of the station. And so I did. I had never been in a TV station, and took the tour. And I saw the machines, I saw the tape machines, I saw the mixers, I saw all these things. And I went and stood behind the camera, grabbed it, and I don't know what bolt of lightning hit me. I fell in love with that camera. And I changed my major. I said, I want to be a cameraman. So I changed my major and continued studying. And back then you needed an FCC license to work in the stations in Los Angeles. Not for cameraman, anybody that was in engineering was required to have an FCC license. I got my license, and I went to work for KCOP, Channel 13. Remember Dick Lane, boxing at the Olympic, roller derby, all these little fun things. And KCOP had a remote truck that, everybody on the other stations would see us coming, and they would call it the circus wagon because it was so colorful. But we did a lot of stuff, and The way it worked there at KCOP, I knew I was only going to be there for about 3 years. So I started, after 3 years, I started looking for jobs elsewhere. ABC offered me a job, and then the next day, KCET, the PBS station, called me, says, we want you to come and work for us as a cameraman, but we want you to work in all aspects of engineering, which is what I love doing. I love moving around, doing different things, learning different things, and I said, this is perfect. So I went to work for KCET in 1972. And those were great years for the station. They were doing a lot of major productions, Hollywood television theater. They were doing a lot of local programming. They were really, really busy. So as a cameraman, I had to start at the bottom, and to work on all these big shows, I was kind of like a utility to help other cameramen with their cables and set up lighting and doing these kind of things, which I loved, because I think those were my greatest years in learning about television and people. And being a shy, quiet person that I'm trying to be, and now with this book thing, it's like, put me in front of the camera, and it's like, it's scary. But it taught me so much about people and how to work with people, and about lighting, and about editing. And so I did all these things. I became an editor, lighting director, sound engineer. And one day I'm in the commissary, and I think it was 1989, around there. And I'm having lunch, and all of a sudden I hear this real southern tiny voice. And not being from the South, it was kind of new to me. And so I look up, and sure enough, it's Huell Howser. Well, after he's done talking to people, I go over and introduce myself, and tell him I'm a cameraman, I'm an engineer. And so we talk, and he tells me he's going to be coming over to the station to do a Videolog. I don't know if you recall those. They were little short fillers that between programming, they were 4 minutes long. So I said, well, that's great. I look forward, hopefully someday we'll get to work together. And we said our goodbye, and about a week and a half later, I looked at my schedule, and lo and behold, I'm assigned to shoot with Huell Howser. He comes in the day before, and he says, Louie, we're going to be shooting a story about an elephant man. I said, oh my God, how big is this guy? He says, no, he trained elephants for the circus, and then he retired, and he hasn't seen the elephant in over 15 years, and he donated the elephant to the San Diego Zoo. So we were going to go down there and shoot a story on it. And we get down there, and Huell comes up and talks to me and says, Louie, just remember, we're not doing brain surgery here. And so that kind of tells me the style of shooting that he wants as far as the cameraman. And so I said, okay, we're not doing brain science, brain surgery. And we start shooting. And towards the end of the interview, Huell says, now, do you think this elephant, Nita, that was her name, is going to remember you after all these years? So Charlie Franks goes up to the fence and says, well, let's find out. So he calls the elephant, and one of the elephants picks up his trunk, starts walking over to the fence, and goes over to Charlie and puts his trunk around him and says, like saying, where the hell have you been? And so it went on, and it was such a touching story. And I mean, Huell had tears in his eyes. Charlie was teary-eyed. I was teary-eyed, but you can see me. And so we went back, and he put this piece together very efficiently, very fast, and the station liked that. They liked the way Huell worked. He was very cost-effective. he just would shoot things very simply and put it together and be on the air. Where with other producers, we'd go out and shoot a story and we'd be shooting, and you don't know where they're going with the story, and then they come back to edit, and then they find out they are missing some stuff. So as far as Huell, they loved the way he worked, and he's, like I said, very cost effective to the station. They asked him to come back and do more shows, more shoots, and pretty soon he was working with other cameramen, not just myself. And one day I happened to be working with him, and he says, "Louie, I have this idea for a show called California's Gold." And he tells me about what it's going to be about, what they would be doing and stuff like that. And I said, "Well, that sounds fantastic. I mean, I love history. I would love to see more of California and things like that." He says, "I haven't got the funding yet, but I have to go talk to all the PBS stations in California and see if they'll air the show." And he says, "I've talked to other cameramen, but I like the way you shoot, and so would you be interested?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to shoot that show." So about a month later, he walks into my office and sits down and says, looks at me and says, "Louie, Louie, I've got the funding and the PBS stations want to air the show." I said, "It's fantastic." So now it was my turn to do my thing, and he had asked me if I would take a leave of absence to work on the show and kind of work our kinks out and kind of get to know each other as to how we would work together. And I said, "Okay." So I talked to my management people, and they said, yeah, you can take a leave, and as long as if you're not working with Huell, that you come back and work with us. I said, "Perfect," because I had a family to support. And so it worked out. And that's when I got into that part about before we started shooting, they called me about taking the car in to have a service. Well, that wasn't going to work. So we got that straightened out, and we started shooting. And about the third, fourth show, he looks at me and says, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "You know what? We're still shooting video logs, because we would shoot a story in San Diego, a little 5-minute piece, shoot another story up in San Francisco and somewhere else, and he would just put them together and call it California Gold." Well, little by little, we were kind of working the kinks out of the show, and finally we shot a show in Sacramento at the train festival museum that they have there in Sacramento. A great place. I love trains because my dad was a train guy. And so we were there for a weekend. We shot enough material to actually make an entire show out of one subject. And so we were getting to know each other, and it was working out the kinks on the show, working out as to his ways, my ways. And the thing is, Huell loved being in front of the camera. Anytime someone was there, he was on. Where in my case, I was just the opposite. I was quiet, shy, behind the scenes, quiet time, didn't want to be in front of the camera. And so a lot of people would say, "Well, how is it you guys can work together?" And I think that's what really made it work. We were so totally opposites. And he, like I said, every time Huell was in front of somebody, he was on. And it got to the point where then he started talking to Louie. And I said, "Well, I was thinking to myself, why is he talking to me? I'm the only one there." And pretty soon it kind of created a little monster for him, because people wanted to know who Louie was. And we'd be at the airport, and people would go just by him and come to me and say, "You're Louie." And And I could see the expression on Hugh's face that sometimes he didn't like it. And I look at him, I said, hey, you don't have to talk to Louie. And because he'd be in Palm Springs and on his day off and stuff like that, and people would come up and ask him, where's Louie? And he says, Louie and I are not attached at the hip. So, and we had such great adventures. We shot some great stories. I know we went down to El Centro and to shoot a story, and the people we were going to interview didn't show up, and so and he looks at me and says, what do you think? I said, well, let's go to a bar, have a beer, and talk to a bartender. Bartenders always have stories. So we did, and we got a story. I don't recall what the story was about, but and then of course there was that time we were shooting the story on the Buffalo Soldiers down south by San Diego, and he comes to me and he says, Louie, what do you think for a final shot for the credits? And I said, well, it's a beautiful sunset, nice valley. They had the horses. I said, why don't I get you guys riding off into the sunset and frame it in such a way that you can put your credits and you guys are real cool riding the horse. So they get on their horse, they mount the horses and start riding. I give action, start riding off, and halfway into the shot, Huell falls off the horse. So I said, Huell, you just ruined my shot. So I said, well, okay, let's do a take two. And my leg hurts, this hurts, and I don't know what. I said, Huell, there's two things Huell liked to brag about. He was from Tennessee, and he was in the Marine Corps. And I said, Huell, I thought you were in the Marine Corps. And he said, oh, come on, let's do another shot. No, I can't do it, I can't do it. I said, okay. So little stories like that, I'm kind of the only one that saw him, and only a few other people. We were at the border doing a story on the border there in Mexico, and we were interviewing this Border Patrol agent or supervisor. And so we go up to the border, and there's a line that separates Mexico and the United States. So Huell had this habit of always repeating himself. And so we go up, and he says, you mean this line, on this side of this line is the United States? And the border agent says, yes, you're in the United States. So this side is the United States. Yes, this side's the United States. And that side, is that Mexico? He says, yes, that's Mexico. But this side's the United States. Yes, it's the United States. So then he crosses over the line, and the border agent says, you just crossed the border illegally. And he says, that's all right, Louie will vouch for me. And the border agent looks at me and says, Louie, will you vouch for him? I said, well, depends how much money he has. He says, okay, come on back. I'll vouch for you. So little quirky stories like that would happen on some of our adventures. And we did some adventures where we go up in heights, and like the Golden Gate Bridge, those domes there at El Toro Marine Base where they had the big hangars. And Huell afraid of heights, and so am I. But I was like, I'm too busy. On top of the Golden Gate Bridge, the wind's blowing, I'm hanging on to the camera, I'm holding on to the line, trying to keep the shot in frame, keep everything in focus. And it's these little things like that. And afterwards, at the time, I'm too busy thinking of the shot the light, where's the light coming from, the sound, is the sound good, and things like that. So I don't have time to be scared. And now that I'm retired, and at night I get these flashbacks that I'm on top of the tower, and I'm like, oh my God. So little adventures like that. And so after 12 years with Huell, I was starting to get up in age. I was already in my 60s and getting tired of carrying that camera around and all that gear. And I was thinking about retiring. So one day we're coming back from a shoot, and I said, Huell, I just want to let you know that I'm thinking of retiring. He's very quiet, and he, in his southern twangy voice, he says, why? I said, because I'm up in age and I'm thinking of retiring. So he's very quiet, and he says, okay, how much time will you give me? I said, I'll give you 6 months. That should be plenty of time to find another cameraman. So 4 months go by, 5 months go by, and almost 6 months, and I see no cameraman. And I said, Huell, where's your new cameraman? He says, well, I haven't had time. I'm making excuses as to why he hasn't. So he says, can you give me another 6 months? So he gives me a pay raise, and I give him 6 months. So I guess money does talk. And so I gave him another 6 months, and 4 months go by, 5 months go by. I said, Huell, where is your cameraman? And he says, well, he's more excuses. Okay, I said, this is it. This is your last 6 months. So he gave me another pay raise. But it was such an adventure working with you. We had this, excellent working professional relationship where we didn't hang out together. We didn't go to dinner together unless it was kind of an official thing. Once we finished shooting, I'd go back to my room, clean my gear, get everything organized, get my tapes labeled, everything, and have a beer or something, and then go get some lunch. And I'd be in bed by 9 o'clock. Where Huell, he'd get back to his room, call the office, check all his calls, and then he'd go out, and sometimes he liked to party. And he liked to have a good time. And there was a couple of times when he came the next morning, and I could tell he'd been up late. And I said, Huell, you don't look good on camera. And he says, okay, take the day off. So, wow, one way to probably get a day off. So it was, it was quite an adventure. And but then at 2004, after I left Huell in 2001, then 2004, I retired from the station. And I still like shooting and doing that stuff, so I had my own gear, and I was shooting for different producers, different companies. And finally, one day my wife and I went to the Christmas party at the engineers at KCET, and that's kind of when I went up to the office to talk to Huell, and he wasn't there, and talked to his producers, and that's when I found out that he was ill. And I said, well, can I get in touch with them so we can have lunch or something? And they'd never call me. Next call I received was from KCET that Huell had passed away, which totally shocked the heck out of me. Huell was, a big guy, worked out, and he was healthy, but he did like his hamburgers. That he did. And me, I don't eat red meat. I haven't had a steak in 40-some years, like my vegetables. But it was quite a shock. And then when Chapman decided to honor him, and they called me and asked me if I would receive the doctorate for him. which was quite an honor, and it was really an adventure. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer anything you're curious about. Yes, sir.
Could you explain the relationship that Chapman University now has, how that came about, that they're the archive?
The relationship that Chapman has with Huell, Chapman had been after Huell to shoot a story on their campus, and he finally did it, and he fell in love with that campus. As you know, Huell didn't have family. He has a sister in Texas, and that's it. He didn't have a family. So he donated all his houses, money, and everything to Chapman University. So they honored him by creating this museum there at the university, at the library. Yes, sir.
I have a question concerning the musical theme that was put on most of the videos and stuff. Did you help produce that, or is that something Huell did?
The music that was used for the theme from California Gold, he actually, because we shot a lot of things down on East LA, and Candela's guitars and all that stuff. And so he ran into this young man and his girlfriend who, they played the guitar and they sang. So he contracted him to do write the music for the California Gold. And that's how that came about. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what did Huell think of the Simpsons character Howell Howser?
What do you think of what?
Simpsons had a character called Howell Howser.
Oh, Howell Howser?
What do you think of that? It sounded like it was a takeoff on.
There's even, I think, cartoons or things on Huell, and it didn't bother him. He was very open to all kinds of different ideas and different adventures. He was a showman, and so cartoons and whatever worked. Yes, sir.
What is the deepest mind that
The deepest mine you went into?
The deepest mine? Oh, the deepest mine that we went into. We shot a story up at the 16-1 gold mine, and we got to know the owner, the gentleman, and the people there, and it was an adventure, because we went down about 2,000 feet, and they were doing some exploding down there, and I think in one of the shows you hear an explosion and Huell just totally freaks out. I mean, I freak out too, but I'm behind the camera, nobody sees me. So.
In the book, you mentioned a lot that you were both the cameraman and the sound engineer. How did that work physically doing the sound? And do you have any good misadventure stories about that?
In shooting with Huell, I was the sound engineer, the cameraman, the lighting director, and also being an editor, I understood how stories would have to cut. It was challenging, but I think all the training and that I had at KCET and working in lighting, because I got to work with some great lighting designers from New York, Chicago, all over. And that's why I say my utility days were my most greatest days, because that's when I learned so much from great people. And so it gave me the ability as a one-man band, as they call it, to shoot Huell, and it was cost-effective, of course, for him, and of course he would pay me a little bit more than a normal engineer. So it worked out well. Yes, sir.
One more question. How many people in
A couple of those, and the places that we traveled to, and stories that we shot, and of course then he started doing, I think it was Road Trip with AAA as a sponsor, and I worked with him on maybe 4 shows before I retired. And yeah, it was, we tried a show called The Bench, and he came to me, he says, we're doing a show on the bench. I said, bench? So the idea was that we go to a park, sit at a bench, and wait for somebody to come around, and then we'd get up and do an interview. Well, who's walking around in a park in the middle of the day? Somebody that's unemployed, not working, or whatever. So the second show that we shot, there was no bench around. I said, yo, what happened to the bench? He says, forget the bench. I don't think this show's gonna work. So he only did 2 and canceled. Yes, ma'am.
We really did want to know what you looked like behind the camera.
It's scary.
But also, were there more programs than we could film? Were there more ideas? Too many ideas.
You mean as far as with other shows and stuff like
you
that?
know, as far as
Well, Huell came up with, then he started doing parks.
right?
Parks, Calgo, and then he was doing Visiting with Huell Howser, which was a KCET production, and there was the one, the AAA. They were basically the same style, it's just a different subject.
Yeah, no, we saw them all. I was just wondering if we had too many, you know, like interviewing people in LA that had a donut shop or a yogurt guy, or, you know, did you have too many of those ideas? Or were you able to film them all?
No, I believe that LA has so much interesting stuff that, I mean, it's got everything. And some of the things that I learned about Los Angeles, I mean, when I first started working in LA, I said, oh, I'm not gonna like this. But as I got to know it and learn what LA is about and all the different things that they have, I found it really exciting and adventurous. Yes, ma'am. Oh.
He asked very good questions. But we do a lot of research before each episode, so we want to ask, you know, like episodes.
He asked very good questions. Did he research the questions before he would do the interview? No. We would, in fact, a lot of the stories we would go shoot, we didn't know very much about it. We knew it was going to be maybe about the bridge, or it's going to be about a tunnel, and the producers would set up the people that we would interview, and then he always wanted to be surprised. He always wanted this, oh my God, that's amazing. And you know, that's because we didn't know too much about the story. The only thing I wanted to know was, is it going to be hot? Is it going to be cold? Is it, what kind of things am I going to run into? You know, that, and I didn't know very much about the story either. I mean, I had the gear, but yeah. Yes, sir.
Could you tell us how you got involved with Cal Louie who's on spot? Funny stories about that.
Oh, that was at, yeah, Kel Worthington and his dog Spot. That's when I started working at KCOP, and yeah, one day we would do the commercials in the stages there, and he would have his cars, and then he'd walk in with a tiger, or he'd walk in with I don't know, and it's like, oh my God, yes, like, but yeah, he always had a trainer there to handle the animals, because you never know. Yes, sir.
Huell Howser shot several shots here in town. Were you the cameraman at that time when he was at Ridgecrest?
Not Ridgecrest. Yeah, I never shot. This is my first time at Ridgecrest.
He
Yeah.
shot Videolog, he was at Fossil Falls, Goldsmith, and Bedrock Canyon.
Yeah, if the shows were shot after 2001, I wasn't with him. And the way you can tell that I wasn't with him, if he wears his shirt hanging out, I wasn't with him. Because when I was working, we were both real fit. We worked out, he went to the gym. He was a real trim guy. He was, big muscles and all that. But after he started wearing his shirt out, I was gone. Yes?
Since all of those programs were so successful, a lot of people have speculated why hasn't someone else come along and picked up the same idea and made a new series?
Since the program was so successful, why haven't other people come up with, actually they have. There's people out there that are trying to duplicate the same thing, but like I say, there's never going to be another Huell Howser. Chapman and KCET right now are talking about reviving California Gold, and they talked to me. I said, you have to have the right person in front of the camera, and you have to have the right person behind the camera. And it's like, because after when he started working with Cameron, the producers would talk to me and says, they're having problems, they're doing, I don't know, I didn't get involved in that. But it has to be the right two people, and see what happens. Pink's Hot Dogs, yeah, they actually had an event for me, a book signing event there at Pink's Hot Dogs on La Brea. And it's great people, really. Yes, ma'am.
I was doing a long-term sub at a rural school where they had 26 students in kindergarten through 8th grade. And whenever it was my turn to do the California history 4th grade, I took the whole school, and we got lie down in sleeping bags and snacks and watched California Gold. And I later found out that that was a tremendous asset and a tremendous part of curriculum in many of these smaller schools. And we were the only school in the district. And so, we had to be very innovative. But it was such an important part of the curriculum. And now when I talk to people, other teachers and people who are retired, they all say the same thing. Did you know at the time you were doing it, the impact it was going to have? It was going to be such a big part of the educational process, that it was going to be resonate with so many people. Did you know you were doing something big?
As far as California Gold, I love shooting that show because I was learning so much about this great state of ours. The diversity of everything, its people, its terrain, everything. We have the highest, the lowest, the driest, sometimes wettest. Things like this, that's so much that I learned. But and a lot of teachers do use this show for their students, especially like 4th grade, the missions. We shot all the missions in California, and by the 17th mission, Huell turns to me and he says, Louie, by the time we get done with all these missions, I just might become a Catholic. I said, Huell, you better give that some serious thought. And he says, why? It's because you're going to have to go to confession and confess your sins. Oh my God, I didn't do anything. Yeah, right. Yes, sir. Huell liked to collect a lot of stuff, and especially rustic metal. I got a chance to visit his home in 29 Palms and go up to the house, and there's all this rustic junk. And I said, Huell, what is all this junk? Why is it here in your house? He said, Louie, that's art. I said, no, it's junk. Because we went to the house, and then the swimming pool, and he had these huge 10 by 6 foot rustic metal panels kind of staged all around the pool. I said, what is that? He says, that's art. I said, no, it's more junk. So we'd kid around about all his stuff that he collected. So that was his art. Yes, ma'am.
Hill seemed really personable on everybody that he met. Did he develop relationships with those people after the shows?
Did he develop relationships with a lot of the people he met? Yes. He would go back like Ray the Milkman, people like that where we shot, and he developed this relationship where he would go back and visit with them, and just because you know, Huell was by himself. He wasn't married. He wasn't, you know, and so he would go on his days off, go visit a lot of the places where we had shot, and talk to the people and visit with them and see how things were going. Because once we would shoot a story like at a market or the milkman thing, their business would skyrocket. And so he would go back and just kind of check with them, and he'd have these relationships with them. Yes, sir.
How much warning did you get to go out on some of the shoots?
How much warning would I get on a shoot? Just some days the day before, and for some days maybe a few days, or just enough to, because I was very, I don't know if it was my Boy Scout training or what, but I was always very prepared, very neat. I knew what I needed. I knew how to pack, and it was just, I was always ready, because I never knew when I would get a call. Yes, sir.
I wonder how you guys felt when you went up on those windmills, up on the top of those windmills up there, and it was the half
Scared. We'd get into places where it's like you don't know what's on the other end, or when you open the hatch, what's going to be there. And a lot of times I would have to go first because I'd have to get the shot of Huell coming out of the hatch. So I was the guinea pig. They send me up first, and I'd come out and I'd check it out, and then I'd give action, and he opened the hatch. Oh my God! And you know, that was our routine. So, some places very hard, and like we shot a story in Death Valley, and I was expecting it to be hot, hot, hot. Well, no, it wasn't hot, hot, hot. It was cold, 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 and windy. And just trying to hold on to the camera and trying to make everything work was, and then I was surprised there, you know, these tour buses out there, and these little French ladies with their little pink hats get out of the bus, and hats blowing all over the place. And it's just because, you know, Europeans don't have deserts like we do. So Germans, and they come out here, they want to experience this adventure. Oh, yeah.
Tell us about your book. Why did you decide to do it? Who's publishing it? How's it going?
The book, I had never even given it a thought until Chapman approached me and says, you need to write a book about your adventures, because I think when they had the event and they honored him with a doctorate, there was a couple of thousand people there, and they saw, I mean, I was even shocked as to how many people wanted to kind of meet this Louie guy. And so then they came to me and said, you know, you need to write a book about this. Well, I know nothing about book writing. I don't have a clue. And so I started checking into writers and things like that. And then I did some research, and finally it took us about 3 years to get it, and we took us a long time to find a publisher also. We went through like 5 publishers, and they wanted this, they wanted that. I said, you know what, this is not worth it. And finally we found Prospect Park Books in Altadena, and they have been great with us, and I've been at the USC LA Times Book Festival several times, and I mean, I'm doing things that I never thought I'd do in my life. So this book has been a real learning experience, a challenge, an adventure, and the nice thing is I've met so many wonderful people like yourself. That's what I enjoy. Any more, I think?
One question. How did you develop the talent to always be walking backwards and never falling?
How did I develop the talent to walk backwards? Very carefully. Actually, there's because I want to see the people as you want to see it. So I couldn't stand walking behind them and seeing the back of their heads and their ears. So I started moving ahead of them, walking at an angle, so people see it as they want to see it. So I worked on it, and then we didn't have like Steadicam or anything like that, those kind of cameras that they have today. So it was my breathing and walking very, very carefully. And so then we shot an interview on Broadway on a Saturday, and you know how Broadway gets on Saturdays in LA. It is busy, busy streets. Everybody's shopping. So we had been shooting a show about the shows at the movie houses there in Broadway, and he's going to interview this gentleman, and he says, Louie, let's interview this guy, and we'll just walk down the street for maybe half a block. Well, half a block turned into 3 blocks. And he's continuing the interview, he's crossing the streets, and I'm walking backwards. And there's a certain point with the camera where you cross a certain point and you're lost. You can't kind of go back. So the only way to recover from that is for me to continue going around and going behind them and see, oh yeah, there's a street coming up. Oh, there's a trash can up there. And there's a lot of people coming up. So, and then just continue the shot, coming around and going back to where I was. Well, a lot of cameramen in Hollywood saw that, and they said they called it the Louie 360. Well, I said, I wasn't doing it to be fancy or, I was just trying to survive and keep the interview going. So, and that interview went on for like 16 minutes uncut. And so there were some challenging moments, let me tell you.
Were you able to get most of your shots in one take, or did you have to repeat it a lot?
Was I able to get my shots in one take? I'd say 98% of the time, yes. There were times where I'm following a hill and he's walking up a hill, something, and I'm trying to catch up, but with all the gear I'm carrying, I'm getting behind. So I'm listening to what he's saying, and when he completes a sentence, I would stop. I would stop him. And as I tell Huell, I said, Huell, I was losing you guys. So listen to what you were saying, and then he says, okay, I know where to pick it up. So I reposition myself from a different angle and pick up the shot from there, and then make it look like a 2-camera shoot or something like that. But these little things that you have to know as an editor to make things work. Sometimes it's very challenging, yep. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, after you got done doing a shot or one of the films, did you get to go swimming or fishing or camping when you got done? Did you get to go rollerblading?
after shooting a show or something like that, did I get to go swimming? Did I get to go mining or a bar or something? Actually, once I was done shooting, I'd have to get my gear ready for the next day. So I'd have to clean my equipment, make sure where everything's at, label all my tapes, because back then we used tapes, not like these wonderful cameras they have today. So I'd have to get everything ready for the next day and be organized and be ready. Once in a while I'd jump in the pool to cool off or something, or have a beer, and but I'd be in bed by 9 o'clock because I'm tired, and then I have to be ready for the next day. So, yes ma'am.
How much did all of your wear?
All the gear, well, the camera alone weighed 26 pounds fully equipped, and that's with the wireless systems and light and the bricks, the batteries that we use were much bigger than they are today. And so then I'd have to carry a waist bag with microphones, wireless transmitters, and other things like that. Extra batteries for my wireless system, so I always had to carry. I really never waited. All I know is that at the end of the day, I was tired. Yes, sir.
Where did you do your editing?
Where they do the editing, they're at the station, because Huell did have his office there at KCET, and when we were at Sunset, the big film studio there, it was pretty big. It was a 4-acre lot. We had a big administration building, big stages, and edit bays, and we had everything there. So his office was there. He just walked over to the edit bay and do his editing. No, I didn't sit in on the editing, because once I was finished shooting with Huell, then I would be assigned to another producer. I might be out of the country with somebody else doing other things, so I was constantly moving around, but Huell had priority with me. So I think that's. I think so too. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.